The morning began like any other at the McDonald's in Dorado, Florida. The sun was rising, commuters filled the streets, and the breakfast rush was in full swing. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video. Inside, workers hustled between orders, balancing trays of food and cups of coffee, while outside, cars moved steadily through the drive-thru line. For most people, it was just another ordinary day. Behind the window stood 22-year-old Pedro Valoria. By now, he knew the rhythm of mornings like these. Greet customers, take their money, hand over their food with a polite smile, and keep the line moving. He had done it countless times, and nothing about this shift seemed unusual. Families with children, office workers grabbing coffee, construction crews ordering in bulk, it was all routine. But just as Pedro prepared the next order, something happened that broke that rhythm. A woman pulled up to the window. In the back seat sat two children, quiet, waiting for their breakfast. Pedro greeted them, gathered the food, and got ready to hand it over. Everything about the moment felt normal. But then, instead of stopping like every other car, the vehicle began to roll past the window slowly at first, then with a strange, unsettling drift. Pedro frowned. Cars didn't just keep rolling. Drive-through lanes had their rhythm too. Stop, take food, drive forward. Something wasn't right. He leaned forward for a closer look, thinking maybe the driver had simply pressed the wrong pedal. But what he saw made his stomach tighten. The driver's movements were jerky, her breathing uneven, her body slumping against the seat. And then came the sound that froze him, the piercing cries of children. "Mom! Mom! Stop! What are you doing?" The voices were desperate, filled with a fear no child should ever feel. Their small faces were pressed forward, eyes wide, tears beginning to form. Pedro instantly realized this wasn't a mistake. The woman wasn't distracted. She was in the middle of a medical emergency. The car continued to roll. If it veered into traffic, if it hit another vehicle, the consequences could be disastrous, not just for the woman and her children, but for anyone nearby. Pedro felt his pulse quicken. In the span of a few seconds, his role had shifted from cashier to would-be rescuer. The normal calm of a morning shift had transformed into a race against time. He knew he couldn't stand still. Without waiting for instructions, without thinking of his own safety, Pedro's instincts took over. He launched himself through the small drive-through window. In a single leap, he left behind the counter, the orders, and the routine, hitting the ground outside running. Customers who later saw the surveillance footage would watch in disbelief as the young man vaulted through the opening like something out of a movie. "My brain was on hero mode," he explained later. And in that instant, it truly was. Pedro sprinted toward the moving car. Inside, the children screamed louder, their hands pressing against the windows as their mother's breathing grew weaker. The car crept forward, still rolling. Pedro pushed himself harder, closing the gap. By the time he reached the vehicle, his thoughts narrowed to one single focus: stop the car. Pedro reached the car just as it edged closer to the parking lot exit. He didn't hesitate. Throwing himself in front of the vehicle, he pressed his arms against the hood, using all his strength to slow it down. For a brief moment, fear flickered in his mind, fear that he might be run over, fear that he might not be strong enough, but he pushed it aside. The only thing that mattered was the woman and her children. Then, fortune played its part. The car bumped against a raised curb, jolting to a stop before it could roll into traffic. That small barrier gave Pedro and others just enough time to act. It was then he realized who the driver was, not just any customer, but an off-duty police officer. The weight of the moment hit him even harder. A mother, a protector of others, now helpless in front of her own children. Inside the restaurant, an off-duty fire rescue officer had seen the commotion. He rushed out to assist, his training kicking in instantly. Another McDonald's employee followed close behind. Together, they opened the door and began pulling the woman from the driver's seat. Her breathing was shallow, her body weak. They lowered her gently to the ground. The fire rescue officer began CPR, his hands pressing rhythmically against her chest. The second employee helped, following instructions with calm determination. Pedro, meanwhile, turned to the back seat. The children were sobbing, their faces streaked with tears. He leaned close, his voice soft and steady. "It's okay," he whispered. "She's going to be okay. You're safe." Later, he admitted that moment broke him more than anything else. "The kids were breaking my soul," he said. Minutes felt like hours as they worked desperately to keep her alive. Then, the distant wail of sirens cut through the morning air. Paramedics rushed in, taking over with professional precision. The officer was stabilized and quickly transported to the hospital. As the ambulance pulled away, relief swept over everyone. She was alive, her children were safe, and what could have ended in tragedy had instead become a story of courage and quick thinking. News of the event spread quickly. The surveillance footage of Pedro leaping through the drive-thru window went viral. People watched in awe as an ordinary worker risked his life to save a stranger. His boss, Alex Mendez, praised him as an excellent employee and an even better human being. But Pedro himself never embraced the title of hero. "If I had to die to save that woman, I would have," he said simply. For him, it wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what was right in the moment when it mattered most. In the end, the woman survived. Her children, though shaken, were safe in her arms again, and a community was left with a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest people aren't the ones wearing uniforms or standing in the spotlight. Sometimes they're the ordinary young men and women working everyday jobs, ready to leap into action when life calls. What began as a simple breakfast shift at a Florida McDonald's ended as a story that touched thousands. A reminder that heroism doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't pause to think about the risks. It simply acts. And because Pedro acted, a mother lived, her children didn't lose the most important person in their world, and strangers who witnessed it walked away believing, once again, in the quiet power of courage.